What's up, Matt?
You know, it's getting by.
Great way to start a podcast. Tell me about that.
Oh, it's just, you know, a new role. So learning new skills, learning new process, that type of a thing where I
What's
am.
your new
So,
role?
product manager.
Okay,
So
fun.
move from all the years of doing data to now helping guide the building of the tools for data, I guess you could say.
Interesting. Let's talk more about that in a bit. I'm interested to see, understand how that works. I guess to kick things off, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. So, Matt Kelliher-Gibson. I currently work at RudderStack. Previous to that, I have over 10 years experience doing everything from data analyst, data scientist, running data science teams, all the way up to senior director level. And you can also catch me on the Data Stack show as the Cynical
Yep.
Data Guy.
You also have a Substack by the same name, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was in your show not too long ago. I think that's how you ended up on this sorry podcast. So,
Yes. Well, my joke is that I'm the Andy Richter of the Data Stack show.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to product management. What's the differences between, I guess, doing data and then making data pr products? That's such an overloaded term. But
Yeah.
I guess being a product manager.
Yeah, I mean, so I think part of it depends on what you were doing in your previous roles, kind of working in data. So if you were very heavy into like the tech and the execution of it, it's going to be very different because it's like, what do I do? I talk to customers. I talk with engineering managers. We try to figure out what things could be better, what things are broken, stuff like that. But for me personally, because I was always at places where I was like the first data person, I had to do a lot of figuring out and selling and talking to people and stuff like that. So it's not as far away from that, I guess you could say. Like I would say if you can have a product mindset as, like I was a data scientist, so like in that role in a company, especially in, because I was working in a lot of not tech native companies, it helps a lot.
Interesting. How do you know you have a product mindset?
That's a good question. I didn't realize that until I was talking with someone about where I thought, the product should go at one of the companies at, and they were like, "Ooh, why aren't you a product manager for them?" And that was kind of when
Oh,
I
interesting.
realized it. So it was a vendor partner of ours, and he was like, "You should really be the product manager there." And I'm like, "Oh, never thought of that."
Okay. Careful what you wish for.
Yeah. But I think part of it is the idea of trying to get to not just what do I want to build, or the worst version of this is like what's cool, right? What do I want to build that's cool? But kind of getting more towards like, okay, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? What's the pain point? What are we trying to get to? What do you actually need or care about instead of just what you're telling me?
Hmm.
Um, because like a lot of things, especially for, I mean, I experienced this at one place I worked. We had a system that was completely broken. I mean, it was one of those things where you thought that the team was incompetent, and then you saw what they had to go through, and you were like, I don't know how you produce anything with these tools. They're
Wow.
so bad. But if you ask them, how can we make it better? They would say things like, well, we have this workaround that we have to do for this problem. It would be really great if you could put a button in that did the workaround for us.
Okay.
It's like, okay, I hear you. I feel like we're not actually solving the problem. We're just like making it easier in the moment.
Hmm.
So I think part of that idea of like, how do you actually get towards, okay, you have a workaround and you'd like the workaround to not be there, but what's the actual cause of the workaround? What's the thing we need to solve underneath that?
Yeah. Like root cause analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that seems to be a hard thing to do. I think And especially now, I'd love your take on this because it feels like if you're a product manager, there's probably the temptation or more of the very hard suggestion or mandate that you do AI for
Yeah.
everything. Have you had to experience that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's always in this current marketplace, there's that pressure,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's from, hey, investors want us to, what are we doing with AI? Or customers who just want to, couldn't AI do this? Which, you know, maybe one off for you, it might work, but it's not going to scale, or I can't do it a million times in a row consistently.
Hmm.
Or you're asking it to do math and don't ask it to do math, stuff like that. Um, so I mean, there's always that type of thing. I mean, I think it's like in anything, you're gonna have to try to navigate between what's possible, what makes the most sense, and kind of like what's, for lack of a better term, like politically feasible.
Mm.
Um, like I remember I've worked with, other like, people who would work on the dev side, and we would look at a product and we'd be like, okay, so how do we solve this? And it was like, well, the ideal solution is we burn it to the ground and start over. And it's
Right.
like, cool. That's never going to happen. So how do we navigate to something that will actually help us and move it forward? Um, and that's where you're going to have to kind of have that give and take to it. I mean, what you don't want to do is like, when I was in grad school, we had an alumni come in, and this was, back in like 2012, so early days of a lot of the data science stuff. And he was like, well, here's how I do this, and this is what I build. And I always leave room to put in these variables that like the VP or the CEO thinks are really important. And you just kind of sat there and you're like, I don't I don't feel like you should be doing that. Like I know I'm still in school, but like that doesn't sound like it's the right
What were
approach.
some of these variables?
Oh, it was whatever the like, pet variable was for whatever they were doing, right? So, it would be the idea of if the CEO was like, oh no, no, like I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Um, the type of company that they work at or whatever it is, right? That's really
Yeah,
important. And you can look at it and you can be like, nah, it doesn't really matter, right?
got it.
And they're like, no, 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 we really want this in here. And so this guy had basically a policy of like, well, I'll just throw in one or two that are their pet things. And I was always kind of in the, nah, I don't think you should do that. If I can show you it's just randomness, why would I put it in there?
Is this how you became the cynical data guy? Walk us through the villain story. Like
So of like how my personality came that way, or like how I got the name.
both.
Um, okay. So I think what it really comes down to in a lot of ways was, like I said, I worked for over 10 years in like non-tech, non like, tech native, let's call it, like normal corporate-ish type companies. And you start with this idea of like, I want to do all these things and we're going to change it and data can really, do whatever. And then you start banging your head up against the wall against like people who either don't have interest in it, don't completely understand it. Um, I remember my first managerial role was they made me the manager of the new, they called it like Advanced Analytics Center of Excellence or whatever it was called. And one of the things I quickly realized, because the thought was, oh, we're going to do this, you're going to be available to the whole company, people will come to you when they need help. And the general reaction from a lot of the people was kind of a, oh, that's nice. I'm sure other people need it. We know how to do our job.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to be as simple as just, hey, look, we can provide value, or here's something we're really good at. There was a lot more of like, you had to go find it. You had to go earn it, so to speak. So that was part of it. And I've just worked at it, and I'm just naturally more cynical, I guess would be the way. I don't think of myself necessarily that, but that's what other people have said. But then again, I grew up watching Seinfeld from like 7 years old and stuff like
Oh, that's
that.
funny.
So so I had those types of things. The way I kind of got the nickname was when I went to Rudderstack, they brought me in specifically because I was like their profile of people who would buy the product. I had the experience, and they had brought me in actually on the product marketing team to start. Um, and there were a couple of experiences early on where, like, I remember talking to one person in the marketing team, and they said, we really want RudderStack to be the product that you buy that gets you your next promotion. And my response to them was, I don't know anyone who buys software to get promoted. I know a lot of people who don't buy it because they don't want to get fired. So there were a couple
Yeah.
experiences like that where Eric, my boss, was basically he was talking about someone else we were going to bring over from another team, and he goes, "It's really important for you to have SaaS experience or to be pre-cynical like Matt is." So they started joking around calling me the cynical data guy because of things like that, where I was kind of like, yeah, you know, like people don't want to buy it. That's just how you get fired. Or like, oh, we want to democratize data and make it open to everyone. And I'm like, nope, no, you don't. That's a terrible idea. Well, wouldn't it be great if everyone had it? People don't know how to handle it. They do dumb things. Nope, you don't want to do that.
It's hilarious. But I think the world needs it. And I think data is one of these things where it does make you cynical a bit. I think your experiences I've experienced, I think other people
Yeah.
have had that too, where it's yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a good analogy in the like food trucks or something. I don't know, like the food truck that serves food that nobody wants. But there's I don't know. It's a frustrating job. I think it depends where you are. If you're enabled to succeed with data and you're in a place where people are excited about what you're doing, that's cool. I think I've quit many jobs because I felt like I was the token data person.
Yes.
Part of some weird DEI requirement. So you get the data in there too. But that's I don't know. That tended to be my experience. Kind of why I just like did my own thing after a bit. So
Yeah, I mean, I kind of compare it a bit to like being like a football coach or something like that, where it's
mm,
like you're going to work really hard to get this job. You're going to have to develop a high level of skill for a lot of these things. And the moment you do it, everyone's going to think they can do it better than you.
yep,
All your decisions are going to get questioned, and you're going to have to deal with the equivalent of like the millionaire owner who's like, yeah, but why why didn't you run the ball here? Those
yeah.
types of things. And you kind of have to just eat it for a lot of the time of like, you know, they're gonna say things and I gotta kind of go along with it because until you kind of have like the one big thing that kind of shows that, hey man, we're actually we can do this, like until you start winning a lot, you're not gonna get a lot of you're not gonna get a lot of like different, deference to you. It
hmm
just isn't gonna happen in a lot of places.
What's your thought on this though? I mean, do some football teams need football coaches? And the parallel to this is, does every company need a data person or data
Oh,
team?
so if you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have said yes. At this point, I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, I don't think it's true
Like,
either.
well, and I think part of it is also just I have this generational theory on this that's kind of like where we are with data now is a little bit like, if you look back to, let's say, like the late 90s, where companies were being run, it was the tail end of like the greatest generation running them, the baby boomers coming in.
Yeah,
And, you had people that were just of that older generation that are like, email's stupid and I'm never going to use it. And you hear these stories of people like printing emails and having to give it to the CEO and stuff like that. I have a friend who worked at a company that the CEO was the only person, this was in like the early 2000s, was the only person who didn't have an email address because he had said at a company meeting, we will never have email in this company. And he was sticking to it.
that's
Um,
a big corner to
I,
back yourself into.
Yeah, that one. He didn't see that. That was one he probably regretted pretty quickly after that. But I think you see a similar thing in that like the group of people who are running companies now, they grew up. They didn't have all this data there. They didn't do it. They learned a certain way of going about it. And so you kind of need a data team at the start there because they have no idea what it works. They also just hope it's magic. And when it's not magic, they want to get rid of the cost, but that's a whole
Yeah.
nother issue. But as you kind of get replaced with people who are a little more, they've grown up with this, they've had it there. I think you'll see more of where it's kind of like, think like digital marketing becomes marketing, you'll see more of like, yeah, I don't need a standalone team. I need like the person who knows marketing and data necessary,
Yeah.
something like that. So I think it's open to how exactly it's all going to work. I think there's situations where it still makes sense to have a separate one. I think there's a lot of situations where it's doesn't make sense as long as you can set up the infrastructure, which is a whole nother challenge in of itself.
Yeah, the generational things, that's an interesting comment. I mean, one client we had, say, one of the largest fruit producers in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and the company was basically run by, I mean, it was a cartel in a way. Like you could replace fruit with cocaine, and you'd almost feel like you're like
Yeah.
dealing with the same situation. Great people, but the CEO, I mean, had been running the company for decades and just knew in his head how everything works.
Yeah.
And so, and so when it came to data, it's kind of like, what are you going to provide this person? They already know every aspect of the business. And so I think there was
Right.
a bit of a reluctance to it. But then as well, this person realized they're probably going to be moving on to retirement at some point, and not everyone has that algorithm in their head, so to speak, and
Yeah.
you have to figure that out. So he's at least smart enough to know that going
Yeah.
into it. So
And I think a lot of people, the idea of data was kind of one of these. If it can be magic and it can instantly get me 20% more revenue or whatever, that's great. Oh, it doesn't do that? Wait, how much are my cloud bills going up by? All right, let's just cut all these people off.
yeah, what's happening a lot right now.
Yeah.
It's been happening for the past few years
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Though you made the cartel comment, an actual quote that I had, I was in the room when the VP said I was working at a company and we sold one of the things we had was like a consulting service with data that we did. And talking to the team of a rather famous company. And this was like my third week in this role. I had moved over from another department. And he literally said to them, um, data is the cocaine and I'm the drug dealer. And the first taste is free. And I was like, what did I just step into?
How did that go over?
Awkward silence. And that guy eventually became a CEO somewhere, just crazy enough.
I mean, I think that the bar's changing for what it takes to be a CEO or a president or whatever. So, that's that's uh that's pretty funny actually. Well, I guess you'd know who the cokeheads in the room are if they kind of light up and be like, "Oh, tell me more."
Yeah, this was not a company that had that reputation. It was one that had more of a
Okay.
squeaky clean reputation, which made it even more
Oh
awkward.
boy, that's like something straight out of like a movie or The Office or something. So that's funny.
Yeah. And then I remembered that later because when I became a manager, I had people all over me for any little misstep in what I said. Like nothing big, just like any little thing that they were like, well, you can't say that. And I'm looking around going like, do you hear half of your directors and VPs? Why am I the one being
What would you
held
give me an
to the
example of what you
standard?
would say that people would get on you about?
Oh, if I questioned like, if there was something and I'm like, yeah, I don't know how well that's gonna work. I would then they would go through this giant thing and it would cycle back to me and they'd be like, people are just like they get upset when you say stuff like that. Like, you know, like you don't think like you've got this negative attitude towards everything. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Wait a minute, what's going on now? Yeah, it was a big. It was like don't express your opinion was the basic idea. Unless you're gonna say something nice, don't express your opinion outside of the team.
This happens a lot in companies, though, right? The
Yeah,
the muzzling and then it kind of makes me wonder how anything gets done, because I think everyone has one opinion, but nobody's going to say anything about it. So you just have this kind of mono culture, at least on the surface, right? So
yeah,
superficially you're getting things done, but I don't know. I think it goes back to your comment on root cause, like getting to a root cause, questioning why
yeah.
things are not working or why things are dumb or why things wouldn't work. I mean, that doesn't seem to be open for debate in some companies. I've seen this myself, and um, it's
Or they go to
sucks.
solutions too quick. That's one of the other
Yeah,
big
that's a
things.
good one. Yeah.
They want a solution right away. Because I used to run postmortems And I had a rule when I did it, which was we were going to map out everything that happened and no one is allowed to give me a solution to it.
Okay.
You have to go through it and just state what happened at each spot. So if you're like, there was a miscommunication here, you don't get to tell me why there was a miscommunication. All you say is there's a miscommunication. And it's only once we're done that we can go back and then say, okay, where were there problems? Okay, why was this a problem? And then you'd start going through like those five whys basically
Yeah.
until you could dig it down. Because otherwise, everyone kind of gets stuck on like, well, we didn't communicate well. We need to better. Gee, thanks. That's super actionable. Let's
Yeah.
also just put we need to crush it. Like that's about how useful that advice is. And it's like once you build it down further, then you can start to see like, oh, why was there a miscommunication? Oh, because no one had ownership of this. Everyone thought someone else was owning it.
Yeah, then why didn't you have
Oh,
ownership? Yeah.
that's fixable. We're gonna figure out who owns this moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, you were right though. It brings up Daniel Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 thinking. Like people tend to react in System 1, which is just go for the easiest
Yeah.
answer, which is jumping to solutions. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And the
Yeah.
solutions tend to not be very specific or actionable. They tend to be like, let's do good better. Like that's basically what you're saying.
That could be a whole episode in itself. Like, maybe should write a Substack about that. But it is true though. But how often do you think it is that like, companies just sort of take that as their action item and move forward, right? Not addressing it, but just
Oh,
saying let's do good better and
all
yay.
the time. All the time. And usually then there's no one actually accountable for it. It's just like we all need to be better, right?
Do you think this is on purpose though?
I think, well, so I think it's like, I mean, it's just like the bigger version of like having a meeting and you get done with the meeting and it's like, so what was the point of this? What are we going to come out of it? Oh, no one wrote it down. Oh, no one decided. No one owns any of it, right? It's hard to come out of a meeting where you're like, we have these three decisions of these action points that are going to be owned by these people. That's hard. It requires responsibility. It requires you to actually put someone on the spot, so to speak. People don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
easy to just let it slide.
well, especially in a culture where people, like you pointed out, are getting on you for kind of questioning things. I think that what you just pointed out that I think it's hard to achieve in those types of companies because everyone wants to. I mean, it's like I've noticed this. People have meetings for its own sake, right? Like let's have a meeting. Let's do this over email, and it just sort of drags on and on and on. Like that becomes your job. And then any attempt to confront the real issue is pushed back on because that sort of goes against the nature of the work people are doing, which is kind of pencil pushing and doing meetings. So
Well, also, depending on what level you're at, meetings can feel like you're doing something, even though
yeah.
you're really not. For certain types, if you're, like the people at the VP level, a lot of times they don't have a lot of time because all they are in meetings, and meetings become the forcing function for me to actually do the work that I should be doing outside of it, but I don't. So therefore, I made a meeting that you all now have to sit through me kind of getting up to speed or thinking out loud or trying to understand or something like that.
Hmm.
I've been in many of those where I'm like, the only reason I'm here is because this person doesn't want to read the PowerPoint. So we have to sit here for an hour so that he can walk through the PowerPoint and understand what it is.
Yeah. I'm the kind of guy that hates PowerPoint, to be totally fair. Like I think it's easy to hide stuff with PowerPoint.
Oh, oh, it
I'm
definitely is.
yeah.
But
Like
if you can't sit through the PowerPoint, I'm not sending you a Word document or something like that.
oh
Like
no,
if you
no, no,
can't do
please
that on
don't. I
your
mean,
own.
yeah. Well, now you just send a chat GPT of whatever it is, and they won't even read that. And they'll send you a chat GPT back like, cordially, thank you for sending this, Matt. But that's yeah. But I mean, what you're pointing out is a need to think,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because like meetings eat into that thinking time, and then everything else sort of eats into it. Well, I guess the kind of the root question is thinking part of what you do during your job? Theoretically, yes, but I know a lot of people that's not what they do. Um, so it's getting to very deep cynical territory at this point, but
Welcome to my world.
yeah. I was talking about this with somebody. Like, how often do you feel like corporate life is more like a Dilbert cartoon?
I think it depends a little bit. I think so. That's also, I feel like one of those. How do you know if things have gotten really bad? If you can go back and read a Dilbert and you're like, man, this just hits this right here. That's like, okay, that's a sign things are really, really bad. Because
Uh-huh.
I've been at places where we read them this was back when they were public before craziness and stuff like that. We would read them every day. Every other day, we would be like, this is our life.
Damn.
I've switched companies where it was a better situation
Yeah.
and didn't look at them because they didn't
Didn't
resonate as
apply.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, it's it's hitting on a true thing that you experience, right? I mean, it's part of it is just it's difficult. You get groups of humans together in very large numbers. It's hard to organize them in ways that like move everything forward. That's the difficulty of it. And you're not going to solve it by just saying, we'll make everything small. Well, no, it doesn't solve everything. Sometimes you need scale. Sometimes you have to get bigger. And there's trade-offs of what if you're doing everything in small teams.
Hmm. What are your thoughts now on just throwing AI at the solution, like just having just replacing people with AI agents? That seems to be the talk these days.
Um, so I don't know how much I believe it, like, at least for a lot of these tech companies, oh, we did this because we're going to replace them with AI. Really? I mean, like, Google used to have a KPI of we're going to have a total workforce of X number of people. We're going to increase it by 20% or
That's
whatever
right,
it
they did.
was.
Yeah.
They, a lot of these places, especially through the like zero interest rates, they just never really got rid of people. People just hung around. So the idea that, oh, well, it's because of AI, it's like, nah, it's probably because you got 20 to 30% bloat going on there from
Yeah.
12 years of not actually being disciplined about this. So I think there's a lot of that where people are using it as a reason to do cuts they already wanted to do for a variety of purposes, whether it was bloat or whether it's because we're trying to reach over efficiency or whatever it is. Um, because I mean, I think we've seen enough that like there's room for certain things to be replaced by AI or not now, maybe in the next, however long, 5, 10 years or whatever. But what I hear now feels more like convenient reason to do things we already wanted to do and we're probably going to do anyways.
Yeah. I mean, just was it yesterday? I had some friends at Meta that were let go, right? So now
Yeah.
they're doing stack ranking there apparently. So that was pretty interesting. Um, but they didn't before, right? But stack ranking's back, all this stuff. Zuckerberg says that they're not going to hire any mid-level engineers or below because AI can just do it all for them. So I don't know how much of this to believe.
I think it'll be unfortunately, we're doing it as a wide scale experiment with other people's livelihoods on the line, but it'll be interesting to see how much of that happens and how much of that then quietly 2 years from now they start hiring people again for
Mm,
those roles.
yeah, yeah. It'll probably coincide with like low interest rates, so then you can just like say, "Oh yeah, we gotta hit these hiring targets again." So yeah, yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I feel like you mentioned the kind of this experiment going on. I feel like we're living in real time through a pretty interesting workforce experiment where every company in the world, there's a big AI summit going on in Paris recently, and every country's looking at AI, investing a ton into the EU. Just announced they're going to invest gobs of money into AI as well. Yeah, I'm just curious to see how this unfolds. In conversations a while ago, you know, we're going to invest in our workers and stuff, and now it's kind of like screw the worker. We don't. So it's a bit of a different tone than
I
the
mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just the places I've worked. I've never seen that much real investment in workers, so it
yeah.
doesn't feel that, like. when they're like, "Oh, we're not actually doing it." It's like, do you know how hard it was at places I worked to get like a couple $1,000 subscriptions to things
Oh wow.
where they're like, "We have a learning budget. Okay, can we get, access to like O'Reilly online for people?" Oh, I don't know. It's like, wait a minute. You say you have a budget, but apparently I can only do it at a conference in a room with somebody.
Mm,
Why? Why does that make sense?
yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, you bring up something interesting, right? So, I mean, obviously, I have a vested interest in people, purchasing
Yeah.
subscriptions, educational stuff and whatnot. But it's one of these things where I feel like even if you got the subscription, like how often do you use it, right? So the company gives
Yeah.
you the budget, but then it's like the number of people I know that complete either a book or a course or whatever, it's pretty small. So,
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I think that's one of those things, at least, my attitude towards a lot of that is, well, let me go back. I remember when I first got asked, "Hey, can you help someone? They want to move into data or whatever." And I was like, "Sure, great." And I had collected all these things of just like resources I had looked at. I could point to books or websites or whatever and be like, "Okay, this is what you need to know." And I talked with the person and we had a conversation and they were like, "He's really smart and we want to give him a chance or whatever." And I'm like, "All right, cool. Learn SQL. It'll take you a weekend. You can use it in your job right away. It'll make you better." Okay. 3 months later, "Hey, how's it going?" "Oh, well, like work has been hard and I haven't gotten to it yet."
yeah,
And it was kind of like, "Oh, okay, I see where this is going." And so my experience is probably like 1 out of every 10, maybe,
yep,
will actually do something.
yep,
And so I don't put a lot into the idea of, "Hey, I'm going to really try to invest in this." It's more like, I'm going to give you options. I'm going to throw stuff out there. If you use any of it, you will get attention. If you do nothing, no harm loss by me. I'm not going to spend that much time. I'm looking for the person who actually will put themselves forward to do it.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of an innate thing, though, right? Like people who are self-motivated to
Yeah,
learn and continuously learning, like by its very nature, just like that's why you're a top performer if you do that kind of
right.
stuff. Like,
Well,
so,
and then there are people that I've encountered where like, they were starting at a lower level or they had life circumstances or whatever it was,
of
but it
course.
was like you gave them something. You said, "Do this and it will be helpful." And they went and did it. And you're
Hmm.
like, "Cool. Now here's more. Now here's more. Now I'm going to give you more attention. Now I'm going to do more for you." Versus, "I'm really passionate about this, but I can't find any time to do a 1 hour tutorial on how to write select columns from table where condition."
Right.
I'm not, it's not my job to motivate you at that point.
Mm. It's true. Yeah, and I get hit up a lot for people ask me to mentor them. I very, very rarely do that for exactly the reason, right? If I you're gonna put a lot of energy into it, and that's energy you could devote to other things, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like one person I mentor, Colleen Foch. So she was a NCAA swim champ. I think she still has a Division I record in
Yeah.
swimming. CrossFit Games athlete, Olympic bobsledder, now data engineer, right? And so I mentor her, and I know from her track record, her work ethic is going to be like you give her
Yeah.
something to do, she'll do that. She's also my coach, by the way, so we trade coaching. But it's like that's the kind of person I want to mentor. Just give them a direction. They can perform at the literally the highest levels in the world. It doesn't matter what she seems to do. A person like that, she'll just crush it, right?
Right.
And so that's cool to see. But for every one of those, there's like probably 1,000, 10,000 other people that will never be that, not even close. So, but those are the kind of people
Well,
I'd love to mentor if I can.
yeah.
So,
Well, I think what people miss in that is the idea of it doesn't take that much for you to catch someone's eye. Do something.
yep,
If they ask you to do it, do it. Come back to them with the results of what it is.
yeah.
There's a guy who he wrote this great book on negotiating, Chris Voss,
Oh yeah, never split the
called
difference.
Never Split the Difference. In there, he talks about how the way he got into the FBI negotiator program was he applied or he was going to apply, and the person who was in charge of the gatekeeping was like, "No, Go be a volunteer at a crisis center. This one here, come back in 6 months and then we'll talk. And he did it. And he came back and she was like, no one ever does that. Screw it. I'm putting you to the front of the line. That type of a thing.
That's
For a
funny.
lot of people who are, if you're going to someone who's like a high achiever who has accomplished a lot or whatever, and they say, okay, cool, go do this, go do the thing.
Yeah.
It's it's not that hard. If your boss suddenly asks you, says, hey, this is a book I really think is good that you should read. This isn't an out of the blue recommendation.
Hmm.
In some ways, it's a test. Go read the book, report back what you thought about it.
Right. It's hard work. Speaking of Chris Voss, I ran him to the airport one time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was like, that's Chris Voss. I've read Never Split the Difference like 3 times. It's one of the best books I think written. Just
I
for
have
what's up?
I have so much of that book just highlighted
It's such a
and
good
or
book.
like underlined and tagged and stuff like that. It's so good.
Yeah. It's one of those books you can go back and read, and I feel like you'll still catch something new or something
Yeah.
that you probably didn't catch because it's very situational as well. Because you're always looking at it through the perspective of like how, how does this play out in my situation, and so I try and read it every few years just because I think it's yeah, it's just Jedi mind tricks.
Yeah. Well, it's also one of those of just changing your perspective of like whatever your role is in data, like you're negotiating
Yeah, all
constantly.
the time.
Don't don't try to fool yourself into that. And it's like, you're like, well, but they tell me to do whatever. That's a negotiation.
Yep.
Just because they say it doesn't mean you have to. I mean, that was
That's
one of
so
those
key.
things I had to teach. Um, I would get people from one of the teams I worked on. We only hired out of college, which whatever. I'm not going to go into the good or bad of that. But we would get people who were from other cultures, and specifically cultures where there was a very kind of like, you say yes and figure it out. There is none of this.
Yep.
And I remember, and like you would say to them, and I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity to manage up. And one of the people said to me, I have no idea what you mean by that. And so it was teaching them this idea of like, just because they said, hey, can I have? That doesn't mean you have to say yes, and it doesn't mean you have to say no. It's an opening to a negotiation. You can help set the parameters of this.
Right. And data is one of these things too, where you're negotiating and you're selling
Yeah,
all the time. And so again,
yeah,
Never Split the Difference, I think one of the best sales books ever written because
yeah,
sales is negotiation.
right.
Yeah, the audience just go read it. Well, put a link in the show notes here, but yeah, that book, I think it single-handedly made me more money than any other book. There's a couple others actually, but I think that one is in the top three for sure.
Yeah,
And just the nature of asking questions, right? Don't don't ask yes or no questions unless they're clarifying. Don't ask a why question unless it's meant to sort of bait you into an answer. Like
yeah,
why would you want to work with an idiot like me? There's
right.
but um yeah, just in so
Getting
many
them to say no, I think
no.
is that changed like the whole way I thought about things was asking it in a way to get them to say no,
Yep.
just to help them ease up, just to help get talking.
Yeah. What is that book that start with no? I think the one he references. That's a really
Uh,
good one is or Power of
yeah,
No, one of those, but it's like yeah, it's the audience I think you understand the power of the word no. No sets
right.
boundaries. If you're going for yes, there's no limit to how far you can go. But I think maybe immediately the word no establishes like the surface area in which you're negotiating, and and it also it's a quick way to move on if you need to. So
Also, people they feel good talking after they say no.
yeah, or no, oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
But it's also one of those things like the other one he has in there is to call out, I forget what he calls it, but where you like call out how the person's feeling or their emotions
Hmm.
or whatever. And it's like it feels like, it feels like you're not really looking at this, or it feels like this isn't really the right situation for you. Because people get worried like, oh, but I could be wrong. And it's like, it's actually better if you're wrong in some ways, because then they're going to say no and they're going to explain why you're wrong.
Yep,
And now you've clarified the situation of like, oh, that's what they're thinking.
for sure.
That's how they're feeling.
Well, I had to do this with my kid last night. He got in trouble at school, and I walked him through, and it's like I'm sure you feel like what you did was right.
Yeah.
And just walk him through and just making him feel, walking through, why what he did was probably dumb, but not
Yeah.
accusing him of anything. Like you're dumb, but just say, yeah, just in the future, don't just maybe try to avoid this. But you probably felt like you were right.
Yeah.
Um, but when selling data stuff too, the other thing in this book, it's turning into a book review of Never Split the Difference, um, but when you're selling data stuff, right? Data stuff being whatever you're trying to do with data, or if you're trying to sell in general, make the other person feel like it's their idea, right? So
Yes.
Chris Voss always talks about, well, how's that going to work? How are we going to do that?
Implementation.
Yep.
Well, that was one thing I added to when I used to do like kind of internal consulting, like from this like center of excellence, was how are you going to know this is a success?
Bingo.
And the biggest thing was you would get these people that were really excited about something and they would suddenly stop and they'd be like, hold on. And then they would have to actually come up with a criteria of, oh, it's not just that we want this, it's that we want it to drive these actions, and that's how
Yeah.
we'll know. It's like, okay, good. Now, because it does two things of now they've got more of an idea of they can judge whether you're successful or not. But also when you get something where you're like, hey, we want this to whatever it is, reduce churn, and it involves people actually like going to a dashboard or something, you now have that leader is bought into if churn isn't going down, hey, are you guys looking at this? Why aren't you looking at it? And he's now putting that downward pressure to use or to view or to like whatever it is, the thing that you've built for them.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's I think it's similar in a way to what you're doing with your five whys and
Yeah.
postmortem, right? Where it's if you allow the other person, again, the other person needs to feel like it's their idea. They need to own it, and once they do, then that makes your life a ton easier. Because all too often, I feel like when you're trying to convince somebody of a suggestion that's very data driven
Yeah.
in their gut, they're like, well, I don't know, I kind of know what I want to do, right? But feel let them convince themselves that's the Jedi mind trick.
Right.
That's
It's a very Socratic way of going about it,
yeah,
where you're kind of guiding them towards it. Or as I think he says it in the book too, of like negotiation is the art of letting you have my way.
bingo.
And you can kind of if there's a way you can ask questions that kind of guides them. If your answer is the right answer, you can guide them to that answer where they come to the conclusion.
For sure. But the never split the difference part, though, this I think is key for the audience to know, is it doesn't mean win-win. In fact, he thinks
Yeah.
win-win is like the absolute worst scenario because he was a hostage negotiator, or so it's like
Yeah.
you're not going to negotiate like getting half a body back.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. You get the person back, hopefully
Yeah.
intact, right? So there's a lot at stake there. But yeah, win-win is one of these things where it's a nice ideal. In practice, Voss thinks it's pretty dumb actually. So
Well, it's also because you don't always know what the win-win is going to be.
right.
Like you're kind of guessing it. And a lot of times you think a win-win is something where they don't actually care about that and they're completely willing to give you everything that you want if you can make some other part of it easier for them or
Hmm.
more palatable or whatever. I mean, so that's kind of his thing, which is also important. I mean, like one of the things about going into being a manager and moving up is if you let it, it will give you a great education in like how things work and how to make trade-offs when you need
Yep.
to. Because I think a lot of people think they're like, oh, well, if I was the manager, I then I could make the decisions. And it's like, let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to have an idea, you're going to want something, and you're going to have to go to a director or VP in another group or the CEO, and you're going to have to try to negotiate for what you want. So you better know what the like top 2 to 10% of what you need is, and that's what you're going to aim for in a lot of cases. And you better need to be happy and popping champagne if you get that.
What are your thoughts on these LinkedIn posts or articles? Like, if I were in charge of a 500 person data team, here's what I would do.
I feel like those people have never done the job
Yeah.
in a lot of ways because they always start from this kind of blank slate idea. Oh, well, I'm going to go talk to all of them and then I'm going to ask them what are their major needs and I'm going to go out talk to IT and like what are our major software and all this. And it's like, okay, first of all, nobody knows what they want. Second of all, IT cannot answer that question at most places I've worked. So good luck with that. And then the thing they completely ignore is the people on your team who are already there.
Yep.
They pretend like it doesn't happen. It's almost like you're doing it solo. And it's like, who's on your team? What are they currently doing? Are they actually the right people with the right skills? Do you know any of this? No, because you're just talking to you think you're just going to talk to a couple of executives and they're going to give you this nice roadmap of stuff you're going to do. It's almost never going to be the case. It's on fire is the most likely answer to whatever your team is doing. You've got stuff that's set up that's currently being held together by like a hamster and a wheel and a bunch of chewing gum.
Yep.
Um, it's like one of the best pieces of advice I ever read was they said when you first start a new role, you have to wait until your mean time between horrifying discovery grows. Because when you first start, and especially in data, if you're going into a place that's been doing it for a little bit, you're going to walk in there and like literally several times a day, you're going to go, "We're doing what? Wait a minute, what did you just say?" And you can't make decisions when you're doing that because you think this is the worst thing and we got to fix it right now until 2 hours from now when you find out that doesn't even really matter because of this much worse thing we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's only when you kind of have a period where, like, okay, now, so it's like you got to write all that down so that now you can look back and be like, okay, what's the biggest thing I got to fix right now? And what's the tire fire I'm going to let burn and I'm okay with it burning for the next 6 months?
Hmm. Well, yeah, because I mean, you're brought into these situations not because things are awesome, but because things need fixed. That's
But the crazy part is they will all sell you that it's great.
all the time, all the time.
And that's so like I got forged in like wartime. That's like what probably fits me best is like we're in trouble, hard decisions have to be made, and I am very willing to make those decisions, right? We're gonna
Right.
do the hard thing, we're not gonna BS each other on it, and we're gonna get real progress. What I found was most places are in crisis mode, but are unwilling to admit they're in crisis mode. And so your job is to try to get them to see how bad it really is. Because if you just say this is a dumpster fire, they get all offended about that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's an emotional reaction they're giving you. Um, or you get into those situations where, like, this is less so now because we're not just giving blank checks out to teams. But, like, when I was a senior director, one of the questions I hated the most was, well, what would need to be true for you to do this and this? And it's like, because it's always, you can always say, well, more people, right? When the real answer is, I needed more people 6 months ago. And even then, it probably still wouldn't be enough.
Hmm.
And it kind of lets you lie to yourself as you keep going on this idea of like, well, no, it's not that bad. And it's like, no, you need to make hard choices. We need to say no to things. We need to prioritize to the most important. And they don't want to. When you're in peacetime, it's all about, being collaborative, which basically means not rocking the boat or upsetting people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's a bit biased for me just because, the company until recently ran Ternary Data. We did data engineering, architecture, and consulting, right?
Yeah,
So it's like we're brought in because you know that you need to call us and bring us in,
right.
right? So it's a bit self-selecting, but yeah, I mean, the number of um, I've seen that sort of self-denial as well, the situation, and the thing is, it can go for a long time.
Yeah,
It can go on for a long, long time, which also means that people don't feel like data is necessary or is important because, well, we've been going through this mess for this long. Like, why do we need
right.
to deal with it now?
Yeah. Why do we need to deal with it now? Um, or, you get into the idea of where it's like, well, yeah, we want to change. We want to be better. We know we have to do something different, but don't change anything we're doing right now.
Right.
In theory, we would like to be better. In practice, we want to do that without making any actual changes to what we do.
Hmm.
And it doesn't work. And that's also, I mean, I don't know. I've come to the point now where like you still see a lot of this idea that like data leadership is about, oh, you got to change the culture. And I'm at the point where I'm like, you don't change culture. You know what you do? You outlast them till new people come in.
Hmm.
That's what you do.
Yep. or find a different culture to go work in,
Right.
right? That's the other option because I mean, time's pretty short. Like I don't have patience if I'm at a place that's not going anywhere. I just my default mode is I'll
Yeah.
go somewhere where I can do that. Because you're absolutely right. It's you could be there for a while,
Right.
right? I mean,
Well, and like I'm just finishing up writing something for Substack on this where it's like once you start spending real money, once you start having a budget, you've got 18 to 24 months to be like, this is our impact.
yep.
If you don't do it, you're all getting fired, basically.
Hmm.
And the problem is that usually, like I know in my career, 90% of the value, total value I've brought has come from like two or three projects. So if you don't have a way to kind of pay the bills until you can get to that project, because you don't know when it's popping up and you don't always get to pick it, sometimes it's thrust upon you, you're screwed. It's kind of like the head coaching metaphor. If you got to do the work to set up the right culture, the right team, doing the whatever. But if you don't win in the first 2 years, you're basically out.
Yeah.
And you can do everything right up to that point. Not that most teams do, but you can do everything right, and sometimes it just won't work out. And you got to be okay with that. But you also have to not like you got to still work towards that and understand what that looks like.
How's Substack going?
It's going all right.
Cool.
Writing is one of those things that takes me it's harder for me to get started on it. Once I kind of
Interesting.
get into it, I'm okay, but like getting from my head to the initial words on the page is the it's the perfectionist in me that I still struggle with at times.
How do you what's your process for writing an article?
So I just changed it up actually with this one. It used to be try to just get words on the page or try to outline, but what I found is that I can't like that blank page just intimidates me a bit too much. So I tried a new approach this time, which was I went to Chat GPT and I basically had a conversation where I dumped all my thoughts for something into it,
Yeah.
had a back and forth, and then said, summarize this into a blog post, like outline wise.
Hmm.
And then from there, I put it into Canvas and was able to go like, okay, here's section one. Here's the points they used. I kind of like that one. I don't like these. Right, 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 right. Okay, now I can have it kind of help polish it a little bit for me, make
Yeah.
sure it's a consistent voice. I compare it a little bit to like if you use something like Black or Rough, where it's kind of like write it how you want. We're gonna put it in the proper format after you're done.
Yeah.
I'm doing a little bit of that to take away the editing process of like, I don't care if you write it as a bunch of cliches, just write it in and then we can edit it from there. And it'll
Hmm.
help clean it up a little bit for me. So that's been the thing. I'm trying to get more to I focus my focus a lot is kind of on the leadership aspect of this.
Hmm.
And so I've come up with in my head kind of a rough framework for how to think about a lot of these things. Because I don't like the false choice of like you're a leader or you're a manager. I think that's completely BS.
Yeah.
Really, what it comes down to is there's like, to oversimplify it, there's two axes. There's work and there's people. And then on the other one, you've got the big picture and the process. And you basically can divide up everything into those four quadrants at that point. There's the big picture kind of strategy. What do we do? There's the process of how we execute it. There's the big picture of like your people, your culture. And then there's the process. How
Hmm.
do you hire? How do you manage? How do you train? You know, how do you go about figuring out who can we pay money to and who can we not?
Yeah.
You got to start looking at it more as like a salary cap than you do as like well, but we want to pay for the best people. Well, that's
Hmm.
not usually possible. You're going to have to figure out where you need the best and where you're okay with. We might have a little bit more of a revolving door,
Right.
or we bring in people, we train them up to a certain point, and we know they're going to go then be able to find better jobs, and we're okay with that, and we're happy for them about that.
Sounds like that'd be a good book. But yeah. Or a good series of Substack posts. So
Hopefully that'll be this year. I'll get that
yeah,
out.
that'd be cool. By the way, is that a Parker pen you have?
Oh, yeah. This
Nice.
one here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. This is actually, I've moved over to in random non-data stuff. I had someone I worked with actually gave me as a going away present this fountain pen.
Oh, nice.
So
Is
so
that
I've
a
gotten
lame?
more. No, this one is what's it called? It's I can't even, oh, it's Pilot. That's what it is.
Okay, it's cool.
So I didn't realize at the time how much it cost when she gave it
Fountain
to
pens are
me. But
expensive, dude. The
yeah.
cartridges replacement is just like, man.
So
Um,
I've
yeah,
moved over to I use that and probably and two other fountain pens as my primary way because I still write down a lot of my notes and stuff like that. It
same.
just it helps so much more to do that.
I just think we're from that generation too, where just handwriting is was still like a thing. Like if you look around my office, there's like legal pads everywhere. I just jot
Oh yeah.
all the time, and it's not even to preserve the notes and keep track of because like if you have a million legal pads, like how are you going to know where everything is? But it's
Right.
more articulate your ideas, work through your ideas, and then you let it process. That's why I write. It's like jot things down, go for a walk. Then I start typing, but it's one of those things where you write a lot in your head. The other part
Oh
I've
yeah.
been doing is actually writing with my phone. So I'll go on walks and in the Apple Notes app, just the AirPods and just talk. And that actually becomes the basis for most articles now. So,
See, I need to do more of that. I'm not good at that, but like one of the things I do now is I always carry one of these little pocket notebooks
oh, nice.
with a pen on it so that I can always kind of jot it down. Like I used to have, and I'm getting back to it now in this role because it is a lot more, you know, it's a lot more talking to people, research, that type of a thing. Um, if I'm not writing stuff down every day, I'm not like that's almost like a personal KPI to me. Am I writing stuff down every day? And
Yeah,
as you said, it's not because it's going to be this like, oh, I'm going to go back to it. It's more like it helps me process. I will get better at it. I understand it more. It helps me integrate all of these parts into one whole and kind of like take what I've done during the day and turn it into, like, okay, this is what we need. This is what we learned. This is what we need to do, and just better keep it there.
yeah. That's super cool. I'm excited for your article to come out. I subscribe to your newsletter, so I'll get pinged when Cynical
Yeah.
Data Guy. So. Well, Matt, it's good chatting with you. For people who want to find you online or wherever, where can they find you?
So there's Cynical Data Guy at Substack. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Those are the two primary ways of doing it.
Cool. And you have a podcast that you sometimes appear on?
Yes, so I also, at least monthly, we do on the Data Stack show. I'm the cynical data guy. When one of the other guys, when Eric or John can't do it, I am the Ryan Fitzpatrick of the show and come in as the backup quarterback. So for those interviews, but yeah, and all of those also get posted on the Substack, so you can keep up with them there.
Yeah.
And there might be another podcast coming. We're in
Oh,
discussions on that, so.
okay. Well, if you need a guest, let me know. I'll show up and ruin your show for you. So- well, awesome. Man. It's great catching up with you. So,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, of course. Have a good one.
Yep.